So this is assignment number 2 for PED 6014, fabrication of a positive cast. So we're going to be doing our adjustments in the biofoam box rather than adding plaster onto the positive cast. This allows the clinician to control the amount of expansion based on how little or how much the biofoam is pushed down or out in specific areas. An argument can be made that this method is simpler, cleaner, easier, and potentially more accurate way to make expansion adjustments. So some of the features we're looking for in a positive cast evaluation is a clear medial longitudinal arch, a defined first and fifth metatarsal head, a defined lateral longitudinal arch, a lateral border, and a defined posterior heel and heel. So the first thing I'm going to do is mark the center of each of the metatarsal heads in the biofoam. This is going to allow me to clearly define where the first and fifth metatarsals sit, as well as where the rest of the metatarsal heads are. This will allow us to accurately place the distal end of our shell. So I'm going to push the biofoam down to maintain that flat surface that I've casted, as well as to blend out any corners or round areas on the edge of the foot and to make a nice stable flat platform for orthotic fabrication. Following that, after blending it down, I'm going to push down the lateral border. We want a clear defined lateral border, and I'm just going to blend the area between that lateral arch and the heel, as well as blend in any adjustments I've made. Then I'm going to move to the medial side and do the same thing. Push it out so we have a clear medial border, as well as shaping the medial longitudinal arch. Similarly to adding plaster, we're going to push down the biofoam to accommodate for soft tissue spread, make allowances for foot anatomy and function, as well as improve the footwear interface of the shell. We don't want to make the adjustment too narrow so that the orthotic doesn't fit in the shoe. Then I'm going to blend out the heel area to make sure the heel is not too narrow and isn't going to pinch at all. And then we want to blend all of the transitions in so that we have a nice smooth transition between all adjustment areas, so you don't have any lumps or bumps in your plastic or in your cast that are going to affect the fit and feel of the finished product. And just a few last blendings to just make a smoother transition between the heel and the arch. Once all adjustments are done, we can pour the cast. We'll be using plaster of Paris to pour, and I'll be filming at double speed just so you don't have to watch plaster dry. Once the plaster is poured, I'll shake out all the air bubbles just so the top surface of the cast is flat and there's no air trap. For health and safety, we're going to be using a dust mask and a extractor system. Once it's dried, we'll be taking the cast out of the biofoam and just with a brush cleaning off all the excess biofoam. Once the casts are clean, I'll be using a planer just to square off the medial and lateral borders and just to round off any rough areas around the outside of the cast. A note here, we're not actually planing the adjusted area of the cast, we're just taking off the excess material and giving a defined lateral and medial border for the cast. And here's a visual of some of the rough spots we'll be removing. I'll be using a small hand planer just to maintain the flat portion at the distal end of the cast. I'll also be using the hand planer to remove any of the larger imperfections in the cast, as well as some of the marks that typically come with a biofoam cast. And then I'll be using a rasp to blend in the marks from the planer as well as any other imperfections. And once I'm done using the rasp, I'll use a piece of drywall sanding screen just to smooth everything out. And once all the smoothing is done, I'll just be planing the top of the cast to ensure that it is flat, so when it gets pulled in the vacuum form, it's not going to break. And for the second cast, you'll be seeing it at double speed because I'm using the same procedure as the first cast. And after both casts are clean, I'll make sure the name and the date are on the cast. And we always want to make sure that the rear foot to forefoot relationship that was captured during casting is maintained in the creation of the positive plaster. And here you'll see we have a nice defined heel. And here you'll see a nice defined medial longitudinal arch, as well as the top of the cast is nice and flat. And here you'll see a nice flat area between the first and fifth metatarsals, which will give us a nice flat area to grind. So now that our cast is ready for fabrication, hopefully we've achieved all of our purposes. We've accommodated for soft tissue spread and for foot anatomy. We've improved the architecture of the shell. We blended in all the transitions and improved the interface with the footwear. We've also reduced any casting errors and made a nice smooth cast to be fabricated from.